In 1948, white European nations of the UN unilaterally gave away Palestinian land that was not theirs to give away in the first place to Eastern European Zionist Jews seeking to create a Jewish state in Palestine. Zionist terrorists proceeded to confiscate even more land by massacring and demolishing entire Palestinian villages, causing 800,000 Palestinians to flee their ancestral homeland in terror. Not one Palestinian refugee has been allowed to return to their ancestral homeland, even though it is their right according to UN resolutions, international law, and world opinion. Today there are about 4.5 million Palestinian refugees, many living in squalid refugee camps in a kind of limbo where they have no voting rights or representation in the occupying Israeli government. The plight of these Palestinian refugees is rarely acknowledged in the U.S., and they have never been compensated for their heavy losses. Thank you, Rosie, so much for taking the time to talk with me about your experience as a refugee of Palestine. Because I know a lot of people are very afraid to come out, people of Middle Eastern background are very afraid to come out and talk about anything that might jeopardize their safety in this country of the United States, when we're having a lot of people disappear and people getting harassed for talking about their truth about what the nature is of Israel and Zionism.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of Americans don't even know what Zionism is at all.
Yeah, I know.
So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I was really glad to come and, just have somebody listen to our story, because maybe they hear the stories of most people in the camps and, the way they came out and all that. But there is also a hidden side, which I think nobody has really heard.
Not in the
Of
US
our plight.
mainstream media.
Yeah. It was really a plight. Yeah. I mean, you can call it a plight very easily. So.
And so, where are you from in when it was Palestine? What part of Palestine were you in when Al-Nakba, which is, that's Arabic for the catastrophe, right? And that's in 1948 when Israeli Zionist Jews came in 1948 when the state was created and terrorized Palestinians so that over half the population left. And you were there at that time, correct?
Yeah, we were there, and I had just come from college into Jaffa. I come from Jaffa, and we were really living very peacefully. And our house was on a street right between Tel Aviv and Jaffa, right at the boundaries there. And we really saw a lot of things, happening there. Every time, since the very beginning, since 46, when the British were still there, and they were trying, to come in between the Arabs and the Israelis so that they don't fight. But they actually made them suffer. They made the British suffer. The young soldiers used to come and hide in our house because we were right at the boundaries, and they were really scared from what the Israelis used to do to them, and to some of their captains, some of the chief police. The British soldiers. They used to come because we had a flour mill, and the flour mill was right there between Tel Aviv and Jaffa. And our house was also there. That's where we were living. And that's why when the British withdrew, the British were really scared after 46.
In 1946, the King David Hotel in Jerusalem was bombed by Zionist terrorists acting under the orders of the Jewish Agency, the highest political body of the Zionist establishment at the time. Menachem Begin oversaw this terrorist act that claimed the lives of 92 mostly British, Arab, and a few Jewish people, and wounding 58 others. This was just one of many terrorist attacks by the Zionist gangs in an attempt to drive out the British and the Arabs from Palestine. Menachem Begin later became a prime minister of Israel.
what they did to them. They used to take some of the chief police, kidnap them, and they tell them, you'll find their remains in a bag under a tree. They will go there, the British, and a bomb will explode from inside the bags.
Oh.
That the chief of police has been cut up and put in those bags. You know, horrific things that made the British actually run for their lives.
Well, that's exactly what they ended up doing, isn't it?
They left Palestine. They left all for Israel after the Balfour Declaration.
The Balfour Declaration.
Yeah, the Balfour Declaration.
November 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours sincerely, Arthur James Balfour. Which is amazing. I actually for the first time recently saw what it was. It was really just a letter. It wasn't anything official or anything. Yeah. The Zionists took this letter, the Balfour Declaration, and made it seem like it was handed down from God or
something. Actually, the promise was in a cocktail party, Balfour and the chief Zionist there. And that's how it started, actually. If you read the root of all these things, I mean, the origin of the whole story. Anyway, the British also collaborated with the Israelis because they were for forming the State of Israel. And so they tried to make it legal. Every time, I would see with my own eyes, we had a very big stretch of land facing us between Tel Aviv and Jaffa, and they would line up all the Arabs there and search their homes for weapons before they gave up to the Israelis. And they didn't leave a single gun in any house or anything at all. They would just come, I remember because the captains used to come and talk to my father. We were right there in the flour mill, and we used to feed the British soldiers, and so that they keep our place, to protect our place. But actually they deceived everybody. They withdrew and left in 47. They left everybody, disappointed, defenseless. Exactly.
The conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians seems to have become a tragic kind of national sporting event where the UN ambulances and international observers act as the referees and umpires. However, it is quite literally a game of life and death, with one side heavily armored and equipped with the latest in modern weapons, and the other side is stripped of all but pride and a whole lot of rocks. Some Palestinian militants may have some old model rifles, but they are rare. This is truly a modern-day version of the old tale of David and Goliath, with Israel in the role of the monstrous Goliath war machine, and the Palestinians in the role of the boy David, armed only with a slingshot and stones. While the entire Palestinian population is being collectively punished by the Israeli army with home demolitions, curfews enforced with tanks and guns, random shootings into crowded Palestinian streets and apartment buildings, humiliating checkpoints and crippling roadblocks, the Israelis continue to steal Palestinian land unabated while the whole world looks on without interfering. The UN continually issues resolutions condemning these Israeli crimes against humanity, and the U.S. is usually the only country to veto or abstain from voting on these seemingly unenforceable resolutions. It's not much of an exaggeration to say that for Palestinians, almost every day is kind of like a 9/11.
And the next day, you would the tanks, Israeli tanks, started coming in opposite our house, standing there, and the poor Arabs had only sticks to fight a tank.
Yeah,
they had nothing because the British has just taken everything, all weapons, everything from them. They were defenseless. And I saw these things with my own eyes. I mean, I'm not just relating what hearsay or anything.
This was 1948, right?
1947.
1947.
1947, the end of 1947. It was sometimes, it must have been October, November, something like that. And even before, even a little before, because I remember we had to escape for our lives, after that. And then they started also shooting from the top of all the buildings facing our flour mill and our apartment. They would shoot on anybody who would come on the street. And they were protected by tanks also so that nobody could come rushing to Tel Aviv and attack the Israelis.
Once again, they were armed to the teeth.
Yeah, they were armed to the teeth already. And the British just disappeared. There was nobody to protect anybody at all. Just left us to the mercy of the Israelis, who meant to have everybody run away because they kept on shooting. They had snipers on top of all the buildings shooting. I can see it, I'm living it now when I'm talking to you. And so finally they kept shooting at us and we had to escape. We just escaped barely with our clothes right against the wall. My father and my mother, and we were 7 children. The eldest sister, the 8th, was already married and outside in Jerusalem.
She was murdered?
She was married.
Oh, married.
Married and out of the house. So the 7 of us had to escape walking against the walls.
So it was a very scary kind of escape. It wasn't...
Very scary. We couldn't carry anything. There were snipers all the time shooting at us. This half of this, where we were, I told you, we escaped into Jaffa. The other part was Tel Aviv. And all these snipers were waiting to see somebody to just shoot at random like that,
It sounds like what they're doing right now in, like, for instance, Rosa.
That's right.
And the
That's
Gaza
right.
Strip.
That's right. But the thing is, we escaped. We had cousins and uncles and things. We went to my uncle's house. It was inland in Jaffa. And we were also having an apartment house built. We didn't know things were going to be that bad. So we escaped to my uncle's house. And then suddenly they started throwing those hound cannons. I don't know if you heard of them.
No.
They were the first thing, they used. The hound cannons, they would just throw them randomly at all houses. And people were terribly scared because you didn't know where they were going to fall, these bombs.
Right.
Just randomly,
Something they're still doing.
Exactly, Now we realize that they meant to scare us out.
And that's why a lot of Palestinians are
Exactly.
staying put now.
Who could sit there and have all these cannons fall over our heads, We didn't realize at all this. Nobody ever thought that they meant to have us just get out in any way.
Definition of ethnic cleansing. It is the systematic removal of a group of people identified by ethnicity and or religion from a certain area. This may be done through genocide, killing, or forced migration.
And besides, everybody they knew who had a gun or who objected to them, they would tie them to a rope and drag them behind them in trucks on the streets of Jaffa. They would come in.
People would die?
Yeah, sure. They would just drag them alive until they died behind those trucks. And all these things were meant to scare us. And to top it all, what happened in Deir Yassin? The Deir Yassin massacre. You must have heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
When they massacred pregnant women, young girls, young women, they were raped, they massacred, they killed the whole village. When we got this news, my father was terribly scared. So it was already 48, I think, actually on January 48, we had already, we left in December. my father made us leave December 47 because after the Yassin he was scared. We were three girls, three daughters. The boys stayed behind with my parents because, as I told you, we had already built a building. I never entered that building. It was brand new, 5 stories, and put so much money in it. Our property, everything. They wanted to guard our property.
So your brothers stayed behind?
My brothers stayed behind, and my parents.
And your parents stayed behind?
Yeah, so they put
just
us...
the daughters?
Yeah, just the girls, and my two sisters. The third one was already in college. One of them, we were 5 girls. One of them, the eldest, was already married. The other was in school, in university in Lebanon. And so the 3 of us, with the other 3 girls in between, they put us on a freight boat ship because Jaffa is a port.
Right.
And so that was the only route we could get out. Everything else was closed, blocked, and shooting was going on, and rape and killing, and just
mayhem. Yeah.
Mayhem, exactly. No government.
Right.
British just disappeared
overnight. The whole world just looked the other way.
Exactly. Everybody,
like
nobody.
They're still doing.
That's right. They're still doing that.
To get this
and there was no. We felt helpless. There was no government, nobody to take care of us, and the Israelis meant to scare us away, which we did not realize at the time, because we would have rather died than leave everything and go out like that.
That's why a lot of Palestinians are staying put right now.
Exactly.
Because they know they want...
They know that there's no return.
Yeah.
There's no return.
Right.
That was the name of the game, actually.
Exactly.
And so we...
Ethnic cleansing is what it's
That's
called.
right, ethnic cleansing. But all my life, when I was a child, I have dreaded this. I have dreamt it. I was afraid, that this was going to happen, and it really happened. I would dream of it, that they're attacking us.
Right.
Because we were right there at the boundaries. We were very, very prone to having them attack us. We were right there in front of them. And so we just had the worst of it. So
the 3 of you escaped on a freight
boat. On a freight boat. We just had to go my brother one of them was already out also in Lebanon. He was married to a Lebanese, and he has just left a few months before. He was newly married. And my other 2 brothers stayed behind to see what they could do with the condition. Nobody realized this was going to happen. So they had to clear matters. I mean, we had property that was still being built, and the flour mill, a very big flour mill, the biggest in all that area. And just everything was left behind. And after a while, my parents had to leave also, because things became even worse. More killing, more attacks, and more. It was becoming unbearable for the elderly. Right. So my 2 brothers sent my parents out also, when they could. And until it stayed on like that, off and on struggle, and the Arabs started fighting, but they came in to take back Palestine,
right.
Which they couldn't, because the United Nations and everybody has already put the plan for Israel. The Arabs had no name at all. They were not even considered. The Palestinians just the partition that they decided gave the Palestinians almost nothing. I mean, all the land that was of the land that was given to them was not even valid. So they wanted to fight back. They had nothing to fight back with.
And they took it upon themselves to give a partition, to give away land that really wasn't theirs to give away in the first place.
That's right. They were coming from Europe, from everywhere, by boat. They used to come, the Israelis, as immigrants. They were coming in from all parts of the world under the pretext of the Holocaust,
Right.
The famous Holocaust.
Right.
They were running away from Europe, and everybody seemed to sign in on this land to give it to Israel.
Which
And the
seems,
United...
would anybody else do that? How hypocritical. Did America say, why don't we give up some of our land for Jews? Or did any other country
Nobody.
offer to give away
Not at all.
land to the Jews?
Not
No,
at all.
but they decided to give somebody else's land away.
That's
and
right.
They looked the other way while mayhem broke out.
That was the real catastrophe. Can you imagine how scary it must have been?
Oh, definitely.
It was terribly scary for us, young women,
Right.
young girls,
Right.
and for children.
For anybody.
My cousins, you should see how scared they were when they heard those cannons falling randomly, haphazardly on anybody, just like that. You'd hear the sound. It was very, very frightening. It's just like, so it was a one-sided war, actually.
One-sided, yes.
Yeah, because
they
nobody
forced
had
everybody
weapons.
to get rid of their weapons.
Exactly.
Then they came in. It was all systematically planned.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, it's still going on to this day. How many years is it? 55 years later.
55 years later.
And still, the injustices have not been addressed.
That's
so this
right.
is why we need to get the word out.
And the saddest part is that even this massacre of Deir Yassin, which actually scared lots of people, has not been heard of. Very few people have mentioned it. Nobody heard of it. This scared people, especially people with young women, young girls. They were scared, so they sent them out. Nobody ever thought that it was just forever, going out forever.
Right.
Nobody. It hasn't happened in history. Nowhere. It didn't happen anywhere else. And I think our plight was the greatest because we didn't go into camps. You see, we didn't go into the camps we had to live at the mercy of the other governments. And UNRWA was giving things only to the people in the camps, you know. We were not included.
Oh, I see.
Because we were property owners, and suddenly we found ourselves with no property, nothing.
What did happen to the property? Your two brothers stayed there as long as they could?
As long as they could. They came out when the Arab armies came in to fight the battle, this fake battle, which actually was a fake battle. And so they sent them out. They said, you better go out. They were trying to resist and stay there as long as they could. They couldn't. So our property was left at the mercy of an Arab army and the Israelis. And then the Israelis put their hands on everything. And they wanted to work our flour mill. So they wanted to get parts from Switzerland, where originally the machines are from. So the Swiss sent us a letter. They said, would you allow us to give them the parts in order to work the flour mills? So my father and my brothers said, if they don't work it, everything is going to rust and spoil. We never thought we were going out forever. We thought, well, at least let them work it so that when we go back, we'll find it still working.
Right.
You know, they put their hands on everything. Our apartments, our property, our orchards. My father put his life on orchards. Beautiful, the best oranges, the Jaffa oranges, you know, and grapefruit and mangoes and avocados. He planted all this himself. He loved to do that.
Sounds like it was a Garden of Eden.
Yeah, he did a beautiful thing. And he kept there 4 Chien Loups, you know, the German Shepherd dogs, 4 of them, with a gardener in that area outside Jaffa. And so it was very, very sad, really, because it was a very, very big orchard that he had put his heart in them. And so they came in. They came into the orchard. There was that poor gardener there. They shot the 4 German Shepherd dogs. That was the first thing they did, because they were afraid of them. They shot the 4 of them dead. And this gardener, poor thing, he hardly ran out of the place, and he came over to us, to Jaffa, and he told us what happened and how they came in. They put their hands, the army, everybody that just came in there. It was like a a Garden of Eden. It's a beautiful orchard, lovely place. My father had built a pond there with different lights, and you know, nothing doing. Now we were never compensated. They were compensated for everything from the Germans.
Right.
Even the money they put out in Switzerland, they got every penny back.
You mean the Jews?
Yeah.
Right, right.
And we saw nothing. We just suddenly found ourselves with nothing, completely nothing. And this also was a great blow to us and to my father, who couldn't take it. After a while, he got a heart attack and he died.
Well, yeah, it sounds very stressful, most definitely.
Yeah.
Your father died at what age was he?
74.
He was 74, and he was probably very
stressed,
stressed when he died. And what about your mother?
She died later. She was much younger than my father. She died later also of a heart attack, because too much stress, and they had to take it. But we were all educated, highly, schools and everything. So
yeah, I'm sorry to have to bring back these memories to you, but at least people will see that you suffered. Not only you, but all the Palestinians, and they still do.
yeah.
Well, we just need to get
the injustice, it's the injustice of it all, that they got compensated for everything. They fight for it, they write in all the papers, and
they act as if the Holocaust is the only kind of suffering that needs to be honored or recognized.
This is worse. You make people suffer while they're still alive, not that you put them in ovens and kill them. You make them suffer while with their eyes open, and they died of heart attacks later from the stress.
Definitely.
Which is worse, because you live to suffer.
Right.
That's it.
Right. So, now your brothers, they left, and where did you all end up in various places?
Yeah, we were dispersed in different places,
That's what they call the diaspora.
Exactly.
Right. And this is what Jews went through. They've had the diaspora, and it's really surprising how they don't seem to have any compassion for the plight of the Palestinians. I shouldn't say all of the Jews, because there is a certain percentage that do really care. But what I'd like to know is why don't they, why don't more Jews call for equal rights in Israel, so that the right to return to the Palestinians, and
they have some of them. When you watch, for instance, every time, some of them, a very big group, not really very big group, but they try not to show it to the world. These scenes when they stand with objecting.
Oh yes, like the Neturei Karta, for instance. I'm doing a documentary on them, and
they try not to, because they don't want the other parties' voices heard.
They try to hide them and censor them.
Right.
It's called media blackout. So fortunately, people like you and myself and many other people are starting to become aware of what's happening, and we just need to make sure everybody becomes aware of what's happening, because
exactly, that's right.
Because that's where it starts.
We never heard of this, those brutal acts, before in our lives. We never knew it was going to end up like this. Never. My parents, my brothers, they would have never left, never. They just couldn't go back.
Right.
We just couldn't go back. I mean, everybody who went back either ended up in prisons, unknown of, unheard of, or something like that,
Right.
So we could never go back. We just suffered in silence, and we had to go through it, It was very stressful.
Definitely. Well, it will come to as a shock to many Americans to hear your story, because I know sometimes I have told people this story about the forced expulsion of the Palestinian people when the state of Israel was created, and how the Zionist Jews went around massacring entire villages like Deir Yassin, and over half the population was chased off. And one man told me, he said something like, "You're lying," or something, or that's
They
not
don't
true.
believe it.
They
They
can't
don't
believe
believe
it
it. Yeah.
because they can't understand why they've never heard this before. How can it be true if they've never heard it before? Well, I think we know the reason. What do you think the reason is? I think we already talked about it. Media blackout.
Yeah. Sure. And besides, the media here in the States, like anything, you know, when I first came, I came with my husband who was studying. He was a medical student and he was studying. He had just finished and he did his internship here in the States. We came to New York. It was in the early 50s. You know, it was still fresh. Everything was still fresh. And every time I tried to go down on the street, you know, we lived in upper New York, and all around us, we had a lot of Israelis and Zionists, I should say. A lot of them around us who had never heard the story. They were just Zionists, just like that, just for being Zionists. Mm-hmm. And so when I went down one day I took a radio to be fixed. And naturally, it happened to be one of them was a Jew, the other an Zionist. Mm-hmm. And so they said, "You have an accent. Where do you come from?" I said, "I come from Palestine." It was fresh, you know, 54, 50. It was just a few years before all the thing happened. And then they said, "Really? What happened?" One of them said, I never heard what really happened. I told him the story. My husband, I went out to fix the radio. I stayed very late to go back because I was telling them the story of what happened to us, how we had to leave and we left our property and under stress and all that. They said, "This is not what we heard." One of them, the Zionist, wouldn't believe it. The other said, "Be quiet, let's hear her story. She's been there." And I told them, whether you want to believe it or not, I'm telling you exactly what happened. This is exactly what happened. And so the other one was, the Zionist was interested, but he tried not to believe it, you know. Right. He couldn't believe that I was telling the truth. He didn't want to believe it. He said, "This is not what we heard. We heard the opposite."
And they wanted to keep it that way too, I guess.
Right. But the other one was very interested, and he believed me. And they took my radio, they fixed it, and then when they gave it back to me, they didn't want to take any money. They said, "This is to compensate, for."
To try.
Yeah.
That's a nice gesture.
It was a very nice gesture.
Yes, nice.
But, you know, to tell you how the media here has covered up and twisted the truth, actually. People didn't hear the real truth at all. They didn't know it.
And they still don't.
Yeah, they still don't. And another story was this I wanted to tell you about that one. When I was still in Beirut and planning to come to the United States, one night we were invited to a friend who had one of the 5 major owners of Pan Am then. Mm-hmm. It was at its height, the Pan American in the early 50s. And so
the airline?
He was the airline, yes. He was one of the chiefs there. This girl invited us because we were friends of hers, to meet with him. Mm-hmm. And so when he sat with me, and he was interested to hear where I came from and why I spoke such good English and all that. And I said, "Well, I came from Palestine." And he said, "Really? I'm interested to hear about what happened." So I told him. He couldn't believe it. He was surprised. He had so much compassion, you know, feelings. He said, "When you come to the States, please let me know. I want to meet you there, and I want your story written. Write your story. I want it. Write it for me, and I want to take it. My brother is an owner of a newspaper in Milwaukee. Uh-huh. And I will take the story and print it." So when we came to the States, actually, he came and met us in one of the very big cars, took us, he put us in a hotel, downtown New York. I could buy everything I needed there for us to live. We lived for 3 years in New York. Mm-hmm. for my husband. It was, an internship. And so I wrote the story, I prepared it, I gave it to him. He took it to his brother in Milwaukee. He said, "Are you planning to have a shut down my paper? Are you crazy?" Or something. He told his brother.
Oh, wow.
"Are you crazy? You're bringing me this story? Don't you know that they are paying? They're paying for everything here. I can't. They will shut me down the second day if I print the story." So
Because they would
this was in the
advertising.
50s, and
Wow.
now it is even much, much stronger.
Yes.
Much stronger.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
Because-
story. So they would not run that story?
No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. He was afraid. And so he came back, the poor man. He was disappointed, but he was a very good person.
Yeah, it
I'm sure he
sounds like-
died. He was an elderly man. But he was a big shot, Pan American,
Right,
one of the
right.
big shots. And I was glad that he was interested. I said, "Here, finally, somebody would hear the story." He wanted, and that's what happened. He just wouldn't.
Well,
Wouldn't
even
take
now, like John Pilger, who did this movie here, Breaking the Silence, he did another movie called Palestine is Still the Issue, and even
It is still the issue.
KQED would not, it is still the issue, definitely, KQED would not air it. So even something sort of liberal, like KQED, would not air it.
Yeah.
So, but thank God for the internet, thank God for independent producers and film festivals and that kind of thing. Knock on wood, they won't take control of the
Yeah,
internet.
but how many people have had threats on their lives because of trying to dig up the truth?
Right.
Don't
Well,
want the
people
truth
have
to
warned
be
me
heard.
not to even some people think I'm either crazy or brave, and I tell them a little bit of both. But the thing is, you have to get the truth out there because we can't have.
That's. I think we should all be grateful to somebody like you, who's
Thank
really
you.
trying to. I never thought I would see the day actually when somebody would ask for the story and the truth and hear it. Maybe I could have really left out lots of things because that's how we went out. Actually, we were forced out
Right.
by acts that are unbelievable. Talk about the Holocaust. That was a real Holocaust to me. I think we suffered a lot, even though we're alive, but we're alive with the memories, those torturous memories that we've had all our years. It affected my younger life a lot.
Of course.
It affected me. So it was terrible. It wrecked my nerves for a while, It's
I'm
just
sure.
growing up and suddenly finding myself with nothing at all. It was terrible. And to see my people suffering, my parents suffering like that, under stress. And we all had to go out and take whatever job we could in order to keep everything going. And because we put every penny to.
Do you feel heartened by the renewed interest in the Palestinian cause, justice for the Palestinians? It seems to be a growing movement in the world,
Yeah.
even here in the United States.
Yeah.
Have you? Does that give you some sort of
A lot, just to have the truth heard.
Sing with us.
As we were marching, we battled for refugee. Their crushing spirits to fight for roses too. As we out and for toil as one reposes, by a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses. Our lives shall not be sweated from
What the Israeli army supplied and armed and funded by the United States government. Is that terrorism? Yeah. Not according to Mr. Bush, it's not. No, that's Israel defending itself. And just that phrase should tell us a lot about what Israel really is as a state today in the Middle East. What Israel is doing to the Palestinians is what the United States is doing directly to the people of Iraq. And there are people who told us over the last couple of years, no, no, no. When we talk about Iraq, don't talk about Palestine. That will alienate people. Well, we have to say this, that if we don't talk about Palestine and we don't talk about that occupation, when we talk about the war in Iraq and the occupation in Iraq, we can only do that by mutilating reality. And our movement cannot afford to do that. We have to look reality in the face, no matter who's offended by it, and say that what is going on in the Middle East today, from Iraq to Palestine, is all part of one whole. And that whole consists of the intention of those in power in this country who do not represent us, but represent corporate America, the military-industrial complex, the oil companies, the banks. Their intention is to dominate not just Iraq, not just Palestine, but the whole of the Middle East. And that is their plan, and that is what they're trying to carry out. Their problem is the one factor that the imperialists always leave out of their calculations. That is the people. And the people are resisting, despite conditions depicted in this poster, and I hope everyone will pick up this very moving poster that Middle East Children's Alliance has just done. The resistance of the people, despite what they're facing, has not been crushed in Rafah. It has not been crushed in Ramallah. It has not been crushed in Baghdad. It has not been crushed in Fallujah. It has not been crushed anywhere where they are spending hundreds of millions of dollars a day and carrying out the most ruthless campaign in an attempt to crush it. What is going on today in the Middle East is the centerpiece of the global struggle between those who want to wield power for the sake of profit over the people of the world. It's the centerpiece of that struggle. And we have to stand with those who are resisting. Is that true? Yes! Today we are doing that. And on June 5th, the 37th anniversary of the launching of the war in 1967, when Israel, threatened by no one, as even its generals later admitted, threatened by no one, launched the war of conquest that had been wanting for so many years, and conquered the West Bank and Gaza and Golan and Sinai. And that was the beginning of this occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, but it wasn't the beginning of the occupation of Palestine. On that day, June 5th, people in Washington and San Francisco and Los Angeles and cities around the world will be marching again. Join us 11 a.m. at UN Plaza and come up and get some leaflets and posters for that. And also don't forget that the day after there will be a demonstration outside Packbell Park at 12 noon, June 6th, where there will be a celebration for Israel inside, and thousands of people will be gathering outside. June 5th, June 6th, see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. A year ago, I went down to support the teams there with the International Solidarity Movement after Rachel Corrie was killed, and I went back after Tom Herndl was killed.
Rachel Corrie and Tom Herndl were peace activists with the International Solidarity Movement, who were in the city of Rafah around March 2003, trying to non-violently protect unarmed Palestinians from the Israeli army. Rachel, according to eyewitnesses, was deliberately crushed to death by an Israeli soldier with a Caterpillar bulldozer while she was trying to prevent a Palestinian home from being demolished. Tom Herndl was helping Palestinian children cross a street when he was fatally shot in the head by an Israeli soldier.
And those were really tragedies for us, but they were even greater tragedies for the people of Rafah. Tom and Rachel were killed attempting to stop demolitions of homes, which now are gone. While I was there, I stayed in many homes on the border, which we were trying to defend from being demolished, not because they were above tunnels and not because they were homes of terrorists, but simply because they were in the wrong place and they were in the way of the Israeli military. I stayed with families who were farmers who had already lost their olive groves and their orange groves to bulldozers. I can't tell you what it's like to be sitting in a home with children who are trying to do their homework and trying to watch TV while bullets are thudding into the walls every night. And the worst thing about it is that most of the time the kids don't even react because they're so used to bullets every single day. And when they do react and when they dive for the floor, you know that you better dive with them because those bullets are about to crash through. In Rafah is it's like a town full of rubble. When you walk down the streets there on the border, there's bullet holes, there's shell holes, there's concrete. There's nothing for kids to play with there except pieces of rubble and barbed wire. And anywhere that kids play around the border, they can be targeted by the sniper towers. And that's how Tom died, trying to get some kids out from under fire who were being shot at by Israeli soldiers from sniper towers. I was back in the territories just a couple of months ago. And one of the things that has been happening there over the past 6 months is an uprising, a civil resistance in the West Bank, in the villages that are on the path of the wall, which Israel calls the security wall. But what is really doing is the confiscation wall that is diving deep into the West Bank and taking the land of villages and confiscating people's farmland and annexing all of the illegal settlements and basically destroying anything that might ever turn into any kind of viable kernel of Palestinian culture, autonomy, sovereignty, statehood. Those demonstrations were also met by horrific violence from the Israeli military, regularly, that range from the usual sound bombs and tear gas and what they call rubber bullets, which are really rubber-coated steel bullets, to live ammunition. In the village of Bidu, where I was, 5 people had died already in those peaceful demonstrations. And right after I left, the women who have been organizing there to do women's actions and women's demonstrations on the theory that maybe the soldiers won't actually outright shoot women and feel threatened by them, attacked those women with horses and with clubs and beat them severely. And that included Israeli women, because in those demonstrations, Israelis have been coming to stand in support of the Palestinians. And if people think that this is a problem between two people who can't get along, that's not true. As soon as Israelis move across that line and say, we want to stand for justice here, I tell you, Palestinians and Israelis, Jews, Arabs, all of us can get along really, really well. All we have to do is remove the structure of oppression.
Are aware of the fact that in 1956, when Israel, Britain, and France moved through the Gaza Strip along the way to occupy the Sinai, they moved through Khan Yunis and massacred 600 Palestinians inside Khan Yunis refugee camp, and then 10 days later massacred another 200. I do not need to tell you or to convince you of the seriousness of the situation in Rafah. But I do want to convey to you that what is taking place in Rafah today cannot be separated from a history of displacement of the Palestinian people in Rafah, in Jenin, in Jabalia, in Ramallah, in Bethlehem, and in the entire Palestinian diaspora, where 5.5 million Palestinian refugees exist in 5 different countries, in 58 different UN refugee camps. many of whom don't even have citizenship, and 80% of whom live within 60 miles of their original homes, and on a daily basis must watch as settlements are constructed on their land, and they continue to receive handouts from the United Nations for food and for basic supplies. The years of humiliation. Now, this stuff is all, this is part of the education that we first have to know. But additional to this, it's not just about knowing, it's about changing the situation. And I want people here to think seriously about what it will take to change the situation, because this is not the first time that it's happened in Rafah, not just in 56 years, but in the past 3 years. How is it that we can stop what's taking place in Rafah, in entire Palestine? What is taking place in Palestine and what is taking place in Iraq is not a function of the Bush administration itself. It is a function of the entire American ruling class. The same companies which today are profiting and benefiting in Palestine, in Iraq, in America, are the same companies which are pushing the policies in Palestine and Iraq. Take Caterpillar, for example. Caterpillar, which bulldozes Palestinian homes in Palestine and in Iraq. They were involved in 1995 in bulldozing their own union. Take Halliburton, the company which is doing all this oil construction in Iraq or whatever. They pushed their tort reform plan so that people in this country couldn't sue the government, sue Halliburton because of the asbestos that they used in their facilities. Take Kellogg, Brown and Root, which is building all the forward military bases in Iraq. It is the same company which made its millions during the 90s in the prison industrial complex when the prison population doubled. So when we talk about changing what happens in Palestine and changing what happens in Iraq, we have to think seriously about it, because we know where Bush stands on this, and we actually also know where Kerry stands on this, and all the Democrats. This is a bipartisan issue. And if that is the case, then we have to think seriously, not just about what happens in November, but by building a new movement in this country that is serious about putting together the resources and emotions and goodwill of people like you and me in this country and this world for a different country based upon different values, not one of exploitation and war and domination and racism and dehumanization, which is taking place in Iraq and in Palestine, but one based upon values of equality and democracy and participation and fulfillment of humankind. So I urge you all to engage in this, and we can build a better world together. A better world is possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want you to take a look at that side of the street over there. From this corner all the way down to that light there. Now imagine that these buildings have all been leveled down to the ground. Now imagine that the other side of the street, the same thing has happened. They've all been leveled down to the ground. That's what happened in the last week in one city, in Rafah. Now, if you take Shattuck Avenue here and you go down to the end and you go through the tunnel onto Solano, after a little while you'll enter the city of Albany. The population of Albany is about 16,000 people. 16,000 people. 16,000 people have lost their homes in Rafah in the last 3 years. 16,000. Imagine the city of Albany leveled to the ground. Leveled to the ground. You go there, you don't see any buildings. The Andronikos is down to the ground. The high school is down to the ground. Everything, all the way. The refugee camp next to the freeway there. Those refugees in the tall buildings, that's level to the ground. You can't even find where the buildings were. You can't find where your home used to be. That is what has happened to Rafah in the last 3 years. That's one city in Palestine. Is this exceptional? No. How many refugees have been created by the destruction of housing in Palestine because of the Israeli occupation? Nobody knows for sure, but there's certainly, it's more than 12,000 homes. More than, they take the population of Berkeley. The population of Berkeley has been made homeless by the Israeli occupation. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Israel doesn't only destroy homes, Israel also builds homes. For whom? Where? When you destroy homes, they have built twice as many homes as they have destroyed. And they've built it where? Where? On Palestinian land. They have destroyed the homes of 150,000 people, and they have built homes for 250,000 people on the same land. Now when you clear out all the people from one land and you replace them with another people, what do you call that?
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing, genocide, ethnic cleansing. So I want to ask you, all this is being done, why? It's being done because Israel has the right to what? To defend itself. Israel has the right to defend itself by clearing all the Palestinians off of all of their land, and then will Israel be safe?
No.
No, they're not going to be safe then. So why are they doing it? Because they want the land. They want the land, but they don't want the people who are on the land. It's as simple as that. Now I suggest to you, how many have heard any politician say Israel has the right to defend itself?
Yes, all of us.
Tom Bates, when he attended the AIPAC meeting, and Lonnie Hancock, and Nancy Pelosi, Tom Lantos, obviously. Well, is there a politician anywhere who wasn't? How many have heard a politician say that the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves?
Zero. Zero.
You must be joking. They have no right to defend themselves. So I say to you, we have to make sure that this message gets out there, and I would urge you all, and all of your friends, to come. Don't look at these buildings over here and imagine the way they would be if they were leveled to the ground. You come and see for yourself. You come to Palestine and see for yourself what's going on there. Whatever you think is happening, you'll find something different there. All of these excuses, the wall, the tunnels and so forth, you come and see what's actually happening, why 1 million trees are being destroyed and so forth. I urge you to come and see for yourself. We're the ISM. You can contact us. You can contact Mika. Everybody knows who we are. www.norcalism.org. We're having a training in 2 weeks. Come. So, what are we going to do for Palestine? Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine.
This looks like a pretty good crowd here, but it's not enough. It's not good enough. We have to take our outrage outside of our community, into their offices. What Paul's been talking about here, what Dick was talking about, these are war crimes. These are crimes against humanity. In the last 2 weeks alone, more than 2,200 people have been made homeless in Rafah, one of the poorest places on the face of the earth. This morning, 20 people went into Nancy Pelosi's office and did a sit-in. We have some, and we have them here today to explain what happened. But this is what we have to do. We have to go into their offices and demand accountability from these government officials. We don't want our tax money used for war crimes in Palestine. We don't want our tax money used for war crimes in Iraq. That's all I want to say now, and I'll let you hear from the people that went into Nancy Pelosi's office today.
Hi folks, all of you are here because you know what's going on in Gaza, you know what's going on in the West Bank, you know about the ethnic cleansing that Israel is perpetrating, and you know why they're doing it. Being here is wonderful, but it's not enough. 20 of us today went to Nancy Pelosi's office. I'd like all of them to come up so you can see who they are. We went to Nancy Pelosi's office to shut down Pelosi's office. We presented Pelosi with a list of demands. We told her what we expected of her. And one of those demands was an Israel Accountability Act. We demanded that she hold Israel accountable. Yeah. And we shut down that office. We told her we weren't going to leave until we got word from her that yes, they would start to sponsor something like this, that yes, they would come out in force against Israeli war crimes. They didn't come out in force. So you know what we did? We sat down. We shut down the office. And this is something that each one of you needs to do the next time we do this, next week, or the week after, or every week for the rest of the year. How many of you are willing to do that with us? We're going to count on you. We need to be doing this on a regular basis. If we want to get something accomplished, we're not going to be doing it by being nice guys. We hate to have to do it this way, but that's the only way open to us. We want to thank all these folks for getting arrested today and risking their lives. The great irony, even though it was a nonviolent protest and a civil disobedience, the staff of Nancy Pelosi's office decided to get violent with us. We're not going to take anything like that anymore. We don't want another Janine and then wring our hands over it. We want to prevent these things from happening ever again. Go to your Congresspeople's office, sit down, and don't leave.
Good for you guys.
Hi, how are you?
Free! Free Palestine! End the occupation! 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 Free! Free Palestine! End Palestine will be free! For sure you will see! Palestine will be free! For sure you will see! Palestine will be free! For sure you can't hide! We charge you with genocide! For sure you can't hide! We charge you with genocide! For sure you can't hide! We charge you with genocide! For sure you can't hide! We charge you with genocide!
The truth hurt. I can't believe that here in America, the States here, you know, where we have freedom of speech and freedom of, that it was blocked for so long. For so long, we're already in the 2004, and we're just starting to come out and under threats. And you know, people must be really courageous who are doing it just for the sake of bringing out the truth. You know, right. I have suffered. I have, you know, I wish I could be, you know, maybe through my story, we will have this compensation coming finally, or something. At least.
So. First of all, you know, I think there should be acknowledgement of the truth.
Exactly.
Acknowledgement. And then number two, take the steps to correct the injustices that are happening now. And number three, reparations. Because everybody should be compensated for what they lost. And one people's suffering is not any more important than anybody else's suffering. So I hope that instead of these Holocaust museums, they should be transformed into museums that show how many people have suffered in various parts of the world, even here in the United States, the American Indians. You know, the American Indians suffered.
Yeah, they did.
So,
extermination. I think that's the philosophy.
Genocide.
Genocide.
Right.
That's the philosophy the Israelis tried to follow also in Palestine. Just to, I think that's why maybe the United States doesn't dare to come out with more, because they have had the history also of genocide.
It could be.
They don't want the Native Americans to come asking for their land and reparation.
Well, they do have equal rights now. They do have their reservations, and they actually have some privileges a lot of Americans don't have. You know, with regards to these casinos and whatnot. However, it seems to me that our country has tried to rectify many of the sins that we have done in the past to our people, the indigenous people here, and everybody who has come to America. I think that now we've reached an area where it's, except for the only group that seems to be targeted now are Arab Americans. And Arab Americans seem to be suffering. There's a lot of quote-unquote disappeared, and this is something that is totally wrong, and it seems to me like it's kind of the Israelization of America. And
that's right.
yeah.
You can say that again, because it's not only through that, you know, they're happy about it, and they, even in the Senate, they all rise against the least thing that happens in Israel. They don't know about the real injustice that
If the tables were
the
turned.
Palestinians are going through right now. You know, it's not always heard.
Oh, I know, definitely.
That's
Anytime there's a suicide bomber, they show that same news story in the papers,
Right.
day after day, the same story, nothing new, but they repeat the same story. In the meantime, it's the daily torture of Palestinian people with home demolitions.
And there's always an excuse, you know, always an excuse. Going into Gaza, Jenin, and all these areas, and genocide over there. There's always an excuse for it, that they're fighting back because.
Right, they're always acting like, they're retaliating.
Exactly.
When the fact
It's
is,
always in
they
retaliation.
came from somewhere else, and they were the ones that started the trouble. So, you know, it is a shame how they just don't show the two sides in the newspapers at all. A lot of people, a lot of Americans are so unaware of what's happening to the Palestinians, whereas like you said, anytime there's something that happens to an Israeli, that's front page news over and over again. And so
it's for the same reason that my story was never published.
Exactly.
Because they control the media, and they have a great influence here in the United States. It's very sad. A country of freedom of thought, I mean, I thought I was free to publish my story here. I couldn't believe my ears when this fellow came back and said he wouldn't do it. His own brother wouldn't do it because they were afraid.
Yeah, that's Rabbi Weiss in my other documentary, Netrai Karta. He talked about the fear of the Zionists. Now, who's the real terrorist? It makes you wonder. Who's the real terrorist?
That's right.
Here in our own country, people are afraid to speak the truth, afraid to print the truth, etc., etc.
Just one of many. We had actually a year ago, we had this large demonstration that the police gave us an estimate, I think, of 30 to 40,000. We had much more demonstrating against Zionism in New York. We have, so the question is why you don't know about that. The answer to that is something which is called media blackout, which is basically that I've lived with personally. Here, this is in Madison Square Garden. I don't remember the date of this. You have a demonstration. We have in New York, like I say, constantly we have on every occasion we have these large, very large demonstrations, and there's a media blackout. What does a media blackout mean? I'll explain what it means. It means that when they'll make a demonstration against the Palestinian mission of 50 people to 100 people, and maybe even less, they'll have covered in all the television stations. They'll have it covered on all the newspapers. And yet, when we will go out, which we just, like I gave this last year, we went out with between 30 and 40,000 police estimate. We had more. And yet, the New York Times didn't mention it. The Post didn't mention it. The Daily News didn't mention it. None of them mentioned this. Why? What is going on here? And don't think that they didn't know about it or they weren't there. We have many times long interviews. And yet it would never reach the it would never reach the print. It's just mind-boggling. It just doesn't make. We can't understand the reason is because the Zionists have it down pat. They have the politicians. They have under their hands with AIPAC. When a politician will try to show support or listen to what we have to say as representatives of Judaism, and that we do not want their support or whatever of the Zionist state or so forth, they'll know if they'll speak out, they will be destroying themselves or committing suicide politically because of AIPAC. The same thing they have with media control. They have a whole system of threatening, boycotting the newspapers, and they have people that watch. If there's they'll constantly complain that the papers are too one-sided for the Palestinian issue or something, and therefore they're very fearful, the papers, of printing anything that would be against the Zionist interest, because then they'll right away be attacked, and they'll be threatened with boycotting of advertisement. We have our rabbis, when we have the issue that we go out demonstrating. Like I say, not everybody's ready to go out demonstrating, even though we're vocal. But there is so many more of this Orthodox community who would go out and be vocal. But the fear of the repercussions from Zionism, from the Zionist war machine, is tremendous.
And now our army is copying Israeli tactics. And the whole war in Iraq was a preemptive strike, something that the Israelis have been doing since day one. So a lot of people in the even in the anti-war movement, there are many people who refuse to point the finger at the role that Israel is playing in this entire thing.
Never. Israel can't be wrong. They just can't be wrong. Everything to them here, especially. I don't know how they have been brainwashed like that. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, they stand out for everything that's just and right, and it's amazing.
And they have a blind spot with the whole Palestinian-Israeli thing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, even those who do know about the neoconservatives and they do know about Israel and this and that, they will speak about it in a very vague way. They will hardly ever mention the word Israel or Zionism or Jewish neoconservatives. These words are not even
they're not
enunciated.
They're taboo.
They're taboo. They may say, oh, well, there's a group of people in the government now that have a very narrow agenda, and et cetera, but they will not say often who they are. They are neoconservative Zionist Jews in general, and they have allies, obviously. But it's okay to pick on Cheney and people like that, and President Bush, and put down America and this and that. But where is the criticism of Israel?
You can't do that. It's not allowed.
Well, they are trying.
It's not in the books. It's not in the.
Well, they are actually trying to make it a hate crime to criticize Israel.
Right.
If you can believe that.
Exactly.
Hi, I'm Wendy Campbell, the director and producer of this film. I hope that you will show this documentary to as many people as you can. Rosa's story needs to be told. In our U.S. media, the Palestinian story is very rarely ever told. The main thing that U.S. media focuses on with regards to Palestinians is the fact that there are some Palestinians desperate enough to become suicide bombers. Yet the story behind what causes such desperate actions is most often ignored or covered up. Rosa's family was forced to leave Palestine with over half of the Palestinian population at the time, about 800,000 people. They were forced to leave their homeland without compensation, without acknowledgement of the crimes against them, including theft and murder, not to mention lying to the world about what happened. These were the first of the Palestinian refugees, who now number close to 4.5 million. Both worldwide, and many have been forced to live in squalid, densely populated refugee camps inside the occupied territories of the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and along the border of Israel with Lebanon and Jordan. According to the UN resolutions, the Palestinians have the right to return to their ancestral homeland. However, Israel has not allowed one Palestinian refugee to return. In fact, Israel is continuing its ethnic cleansing campaign against the remaining non-Jewish Palestinian people to steal their land for the Jewish state of Israel, with our tax dollars and with our government support. Apartheid, ethnic cleansing, discrimination and persecution against others based on religion, ethnicity, race, or gender is not consistent with a true democracy or American values and ideals. Therefore, as more Americans learn the truth about apartheid Israel, I believe that together we will be successful in pressuring our government to stop its blind, unconditional support for Israel as a Jewish supremacist state. Just as we are right to pressure South Africa to transform from an apartheid regime to a true democracy with equal rights for all, we must do the same to Israel, starting with telling the truth about Israel. Without justice, there can be no peace. This is a grassroots effort, so please spread the word, and we will succeed in achieving justice for all and peace in this world.